Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts thinks the Super Bowl should be overflowing with kibble. That's Lenny. I feel like I use that every year at the Super Bowl.
It's easy. It's nice.
We are live at the Super Bowl. Well, not yet, but we're in New Orleans on Radio Row. So you might hear some ambient noise in the background if you're listening to this. I am with Ben Solak, who has been here a couple days, but we're going to preview the game today. Before we get into it, how has the vibe been on Radio Row?
It's been, firstly, it's huge this year. I feel like there's a bajillion. And then Brian Curtis made this point to me. Nowadays, everybody's got the video pods. So there's a lot more cameras, there's a lot more umbrella lights. Absolutely. Back in the day, Radio Row used to be all the journalists, right? Maybe a microphone or two. Now it's just backdrops everywhere. It's all TV shots.
I guess they got to change it to Podcast Row.
You literally do have to change it to podcast row. But Radio Row has a much nicer rhythm to it. Yeah.
Okay, second question. I'm sure you have been talking to people about the game and picking. What has been like this breakdown Chiefs-Eagles thus far?
I'm very worried because it's like 90% Chiefs.
Really?
But yeah, which I feel like I'm inclined to take the Eagles just because I think the public is too hard on the Chiefs. Everybody's there on the Chiefs, but I also kind of lean the Chiefs a little bit. Everybody's like, oh yeah, it's going to be a close game. Oh, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tight. Chiefs are going to win, which kind of is understandable given how the season has gone.
Yeah. Listeners to this show, viewers as well on YouTube, are aware that you have picked against the Chiefs a lot this season.
3 times, man.
So I'm going to reserve my wait until the end of our discussion. So we're here to preview the game. We're going to talk about both sides of the ball. And then I actually have gone back and forth. So I'll start by saying that I do think this is very close. One side you have the Eagles, who I do believe are the more talented team. On the other side, you have the quarterback, the coaches, and you do have some obviously unbelievable players. But let's start on that side of the ball. Let's start with Patrick Mahomes. Because I'm really geeked out on this matchup. We were talking about this last week on NFL Live, just to kind of go big picture. Going back and rewatching the 2022 game, there's a lot of things that struck me, one of which, holy smokes, Jalen Hurts was awesome. We'll get to that side. But the other thing that really jumped out to me is just how different this defense is from the one that gave up 38 points in the Super Bowl. That was a defense that was built on that four-man rush.
I try not to think about that defense as much.
Well, it was, the pass rush was unbelievable during the regular season. It was good in the game, too. Hassan Reddick had this incredible run. But it was fragile, and I think we saw that in the Super Bowl. They were exposed. They struggled against a lot of, we can get to kind of some of the things they struggled with and better. This defense, to me, this Eagles defense just feels much more complete, better coached, and let's start here. Better suited, I believe, to take on this version of the Chiefs offense.
You feel that way just because, like, the tackling ability, the rally down to the short stuff?
Yeah, like this, exactly, basically. So this Chiefs offense, especially we've seen since the second half of the season, is built on quick game, RPOs, the ball's coming out fast, and they're getting yards after the catch. In fact, over the last 2 months, so since week 14, the Chiefs offense ranks first in yards after catch per reception. Not surprising. Guess who ranks first in limiting yards after catch per reception? The Philadelphia Eagles. So this is a real strength on strength matchup, don't you think?
No, I do think so. And the Chiefs, you brought up that time frame. When the Chiefs got Isaiah Pacheco back into the lineup, Kareem Hunt had been running the ball for them, little Carson Steele. They clearly are like, Pacheco's back. We kind of reestablish our running game. And then Pacheco just has not been healthy, right? He's not been like the guy that they want him to be pre-injury. And in that moment, Marquise Brown also returned to the lineup. And when Marquise Brown's back, it's like, okay, now we're going to use Xavier Worthy underneath and like all these reverses, all these throws behind the line of scrimmage. And people say, oh, it's because Marquise Brown is in the lineup. To me, it's because they're replacing the running game, right? And a lot of that, Mahomes, his time to throw is plummeting. His depth of target, which is already low, is getting lower. The amount of throws behind the line of scrimmage is still super high, and all that yak per reception. That's all the function of them replacing the running game with the quick passing game, which you can do only if you have a quarterback who is extremely perfect, right? Who just always finds the right guy early, right? You have a very good design Andy Reid, guy who can make guys open behind the line of scrimmage, get good blockers, right? Number advantage and what have you. And so it is a testament to how long Andy and Mahomes have been doing this together, that they can just replace that running game with the RPO game, with the screen, right? Tag a screen to a run, and obviously with that quick passing game underneath. I do think that, like, when you see it right, how does that match up into Vic? Vic's going to give you that for 4 quarters. Yeah. And the theory behind a Vic Fangio defense, the too high movement, the Vic Fangioification of football. The theory was always, if we make you do 12-play drives, you're going to make a mistake at some point. And the counter positive to that, the exception that proves the rule, is the existence of a player like Mahomes and the existence of an offense like the Chiefs, where it's like, no, we've decided to play this way because we're perfect, because our quarterback won't make those mistakes. And so I think I think the matchup is very interesting. I'm worried that the Eagles are going to say, oh, we're going to play our stuff. It's going to work for us as it's worked. But you're just not going to get enough mistakes out of 15, enough mistakes out of the Chiefs offense for it to actually manifest the way. I think the Eagles might need to get a little bit more risky, might need to get a little bit more versatile in the fronts, might need to press up a little bit more because the Chiefs aren't going to make the mistakes that the other teams do when they face this defense.
I think the contrast that you would draw there is the Commanders, right? Because what you're describing, the Eagles saying, cool, work your way slowly, dink and dunk down the field, and then at some point we're either going to get a stop or maybe we'll force a mistake or you'll kick a field goal like the Commanders did on that first drive instead of going for it. But the problem is, like you said, the Chiefs are like they're not the souped up Commanders because the offense is very different, but they are, I think, much more content to play that way the entire game. They're happy to keep the Eagles offense off the field. Pretty sure the Chiefs have the most plays per drive. I almost guarantee that.
They have one of the lowest drives per game of any teams, and the Eagles are the same thing, right? It's just
methodical.
They're going to take the air out of this game, both teams.
But you know, it's interesting because like I do think, as much as the Chiefs are content to play that way, they do need to get those yards after the catch. Like we talk about how it's become this really efficient offense, but some of that efficiency does require them to turn that screen into 6 yards instead of 4. By the way, screens, the Eagles, best team in the NFL against screens, against Sports Info Solutions, unsurprisingly.
I think Cooper DeJean's going to have 14 tackles in this game, man. DeJean against the screen is like that one of the first things I'm testing if I'm Andy Reid. I want to test Oren Burks, right? And his ability to tackle. He's the worst tackler in that second level for the Eagles. But then I'm also said, all right, I'm going to put your nickel. Right? This is a rookie now. He's been great, young DeJean, but he's very close to the line of scrimmage. I'm going to show him a lot of nonsense. I'm going to put 2 guys in the backfield. I'm going to move guys cross formation. I'm going to throw screens to see if he can sort that out, if he can figure it out, and if he can go make tackles on Xavier Worthy into the sideline. Big test for DeJean.
So I talked a little bit about how the Eagles matched up with the Commanders. So going back to the AFC Championship, that first drive is one that I kind of want to zero in on in terms of like how will the Eagles play it differently from the Bills, which is to say in the AFC Championship, the Chiefs come out and they basically call an RPO on every single play on that drive.
Day one install stuff.
And
nasty.
Yeah, and I think there's a litany of reasons for that. Some of it is game matchup specific, right? That is, if you're playing the Bills, who play a lot of zone coverage, you want to attack them with RPOs. Right. The middle of the field is where they're weak. They ended up forcing the Bills to play more man as a result, and then they killed them with man. So I guess my question for you is, if the Chiefs come out and do the same thing, because I kind of think they will, I think it's going to be a pretty similar game plan. How do the Eagles match up with that RPO attack?
So because the Eagles have better safeties, and then they'll rotate the safeties, they'll bring the safeties down from depth, they're going to be a little bit better against the RPO game structurally than the Bills were, right? RPO, I think, generally, there was some ex-quarterback who had a famous line where it was like the RPO makes zone unplayable. It might have been Collinsworth, actually. I can't remember. It was years ago when the RPO first happened. It was like, okay, probably that's a stretch, but the RPO makes zone very difficult. Fangio's got a good structure of zone defense to deal with the RPO because of the way that you use Zach Ball and because of the way that Reed and Chauncey come down into the box. So firstly, right, you check your work and you see if, all right, can we live like this? Can we make our tackles in space? If they force you into a little bit more man coverage, when I was thinking about this matchup, I went back and I watched Eagles versus Ravens from this regular season, talking about Lamar and kind of the stress that offense puts on you. Because the Ravens also didn't have like a great receiver room, and the Eagles pretty quickly were like, oh yeah, we're just going to play very tight to routes. And like Lamar's going to beat us on some stuff, but we just don't fear enough of the weapons here to feel like we have to play in zone coverage. Mahomes is an additional layer of a passer than even Lamar was this season. But if you walk out on that first drive, and it's okay to check your work and get 7 put on you on the first drive and they're RPOing you to death, all right, I think you can pretty quickly go, all right, Quinion Mitchell, like we've trusted you all season. We're not going to fix what ain't broke. Darius Slay's had a very nice resurgent season in his 30s. We're going to put you guys opposite the wide receivers. We're going to put a Zach Bonner, Reed Blankenship on Travis Kelce. Yeah, we're going to lose some routes, but we also think we can play tight to the 36-year-old, right? He doesn't move the way that he used to. We're going to make Mahomes make throws against man.
The Eagles do play a fair amount of man. I think when we think of Vic Fangio, we do think of this zone-heavy, too high defense, but they played man, I think, at like the 10th highest rate in the NFL this year. They're very confident in the ability of those young corners.
Stuff. Yeah,
the quarter stuff is basically man-match.
And it's because of Quinion. So, it's because they have that player on the outside.
If they do play more man, and I agree with you, I think I always say playing zone against Travis Kelce in the playoffs is a death wish because they'll just 7-yard you to death, right? But if they do play more man and they do challenge Kelce and say beat us with someone else, then I think it becomes less about beating the Chiefs' skill players and more about beating the Chiefs' scheme. Yeah. And something that they have gotten very good at, I mean, they're obviously always been good at that, but I think with regards to the Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy in particular, is scheming guys open versus man coverage in a way that they were really not at the beginning of the year. A lot of this has to do with, Andy Reid figuring out the right way to use Xavier Worthy in particular. But the return of Hollywood Brown, he is the most kind of like traditional receiver, right, on the roster. He's like their separator who wins pretty quickly, even though he hasn't been a big piece. So when I talk about being with a scheme, that means having a plan for their stacks, their bunches, their motion. And that brings me back to the 2022 Super Bowl because
100%.
For those who have forgotten, a very big reason, a big part of the Chiefs' win that year was beating the Eagles' defense at the goal line with that little return motion.
Yo-yo nonsense.
And motion just generally was throughout the game. So interesting thing, kind of going back and looking at that offense versus this one, that offense, when teams used motion at the snap, was below average in EPA per defense. The Eagles' defense was below average in EPA per play. This defense, this Vic Fangio defense, has been the second best defense in the NFL to the Baltimore Ravens, negative 0.09 EPA per play versus positive 0.05.
Yeah.
So do you feel confident if they play man coverage that they can handle what Andy Reid throws their way?
I think, yes, in that on a majority of plays, the Eagles will be tight to routes, and they will force difficult throws, and they will make tackles. The problem is that you're not going to win 100% of plays. And when the stack manifests itself, when the releases declare which receivers where, when the bunch and the motion happens, if you end up in a spot where it's Darius Slay chasing Xavier Worthy, it doesn't matter. You were successful in the first 5 plays. House call. That's 7 points, right? And that's the thing about the speed that the Chiefs have been able to reintroduce with Xavier Worthy, not as a deep threat, but as an underneath guy. And then Marquise Brown, who you bring up, 112 unrealized air yards, Marquise Brown, over the last 5 games, right? That's air yards that he should have had as a receiver, but then he wasn't able to bring in, right? He had against the Bills, he had a very easy catchable ball that they weren't able to bring in. Against the Texans, he had one that hit him in the hands 19 times over, and he didn't bring that one in. They are finding open downfield connections with Brown. They're just not catching them.
Yeah, but I feel like I've been saying this about the Chiefs the entire season. They're so close to.
And I've been saying it about Hollywood Brown for his entire career.
Yeah, right.
But again, the thing is if you give the Chiefs 10 bites of that apple, 11, 12 bites of that apple of man coverage where they're getting those releases and Mahomes is protected, they don't need to connect on 5. They need to connect on 1, right? And then you get that big play. It scares you off of a little bit of zone coverage. It puts a quick 7 on the board, and it puts pressure on that Eagles offense to then score fast in kind, right, and not fall behind. And so I think that they can be good at man coverage. I think they can win a lot of reps. I also think it takes one stumble against a team that puts motion like this, has speed like this, for all those previous successes not to matter. And so if you get the Chiefs there, you feel like it's a win, but you're clenching your butt cheeks every single time, right? They walk out there in 4 wide and they're moving guys around because it can all break in one play.
One area where I think the Eagles, and you alluded to this when you talked about the Chiefs' inability to run the ball, this is the defense where everything flows from their ability to stop the run with light boxes. This is why it's Vic Fangio's dream defense, because they play the most light boxes in the NFL, and they have been, statistically not the best, but good enough so that they can do that, and then they can put more bodies in coverage and do everything else and choke you out in the pass. So I actually would say this could be a vulnerability against, I don't know if they were playing like the Lions or the Ravens again. That was something that really jumped out to me going back and watching some of those Rams drives, is the amount of success the Rams had putting Kyron Williams under center and just pounding the rock. Problem for Kansas City is they can't. This is right now a very bad rushing attack.
Yeah. And I would really want to, if I was Andy Reid and Matt Nagy, I'd want to be able to run the Eagles pass rushers out of snap jumping. I'd want to be able to run the Eagles pass rushers out of one gap and go, right? And the Eagles are going to put Nolan Smith in the widest alignment you ever doggone saw on Jawan Taylor, and they're going to sprint at him, right? They're going to put Milton Williams on Mike Caliendo, and they're going to sprint at him, right? They think that they can win very fast in the down, get quick pressure, 2-second pressure, 2.25-second pressure. And the best way to stop that as an offense is to slow those guys down by double teaming them and running the ball at them. You can do it. They're going to do it on early downs. The Chiefs are going to run the ball just enough to make the Eagles honest, and they're going to pass on every single other down. But if you can win those reps as the Eagles, and you expect to, then you can play a little fast and loose with the defensive line, right? And you can ask Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, go, 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 go. We will sacrifice a little bit of run integrity because we'll clean it up in the back end. We'll clean it up behind you to make sure we get those early pressures on Mahomes. So the Chiefs, their bar for running against the Eagles is quite low. It's just enough to keep the pass rush honest. I'm just not sure they can even clear that bar with the movements on the offensive line and with the issues with the running backs.
I think going back to the RPOs too, the Eagles will pretty aggressively play the pass and encourage Mahomes to give. Most of their runs are part of an RPO at this point.
And so much of that run RPO game, then it happens in the screen game, happens outside. That doesn't impact the pass rush, right? Nolan Smith's already shooting upfield. He's going to jump and try to get in the throwing lane, but he's still going.
Let's talk about Nolan Smith because
no gloves, Nolan.
He statistically, since week 13, which is really when he became a full-time edge, has been quietly unbelievable. And I feel like maybe this has flown under the radar a little bit. And like a lot of it, him and Jalen Carter playing next to each other, I think they're both kind of been the beneficiary of each other. Like, I think we think of this Eagles defensive line, the 4-man rush, and we think Jalen Carter is the best player, and that's true. Right. And everyone else is just kind of Jalen Carter's eating up double teams, and then Milton Williams, who, by the way, Milton Williams.
Yep, I've got finding my Milton stat.
4th in pass rush win amongst every defensive player in the playoffs. Yep.
Since week 10. Chris Jones, 13.7% pressure rate. Milton Williams, 12.7% pressure rate.
You're saying Milton Williams is as good as Chris Jones?
Milton Williams has been a top 20 pass rusher by pressure rate back half of the season. Soon to be free agent, soon to be a very, very rich man, Milton Williams.
Well, I feel like what we have seen is like it's not just a bunch of like guys cleaning up and benefiting from Jalen Carter. I actually think Jalen Carter himself is now benefiting from what Nolan Smith is doing.
Yep.
Since that week 13, this 4-man rush has actually been really impressive. We talk about the Chiefs offensive line a lot and how they made the midseason decision to move Joe Thuney to left tackle, creating some vulnerability on the interior. Do you think it's that where they're most vulnerable at obviously Mike Caliendo playing guard, or do you think Juwan Taylor versus Nolan Smith is the Chiefs' best matchup in this game?
I think left guard is where you're most vulnerable. But for sure, the headliners on who are the sneaky Eagles, who are the under-discussed Eagles who can make it decide this game, it's Milton Williams and Nolan Smith. Because Jalen Carter plays exclusively on the defense's left. He's going to line up over the right guard every single snap. That's Trey Smith. That's a good one-on-one, but you edge Carter in that one. And you're going to want to slide Creed Humphrey to that side.
I was just about to ask, though, because, like, Creed has slid to help Caliendo, who's the left guard, who's came in for Thuney. But what you're saying is because it's Jalen Carter, they're not – because Trey Smith is the best interior off – oh, well, no, Creed is. But I'm just saying, like, typically you would one-on-one with Trey Smith.
Yeah. I think typically you do. I think that if they do that, I think Carter's going to be able to punish Smith. I do. Wow. Smith is a good player. I think he's stronger as a run blocker than a pass blocker, and the players to whom he loses are the players of Carter's mold. A very quick guy who still has power. To me, like, I think, yeah, sure. I think if you want to start sliding to Caliendo, that's fine. I think what's going to happen is the Eagles they're playing Nolan quite wide. Nolan's a very light rusher. They line him up very wide on passing downs. And remember, Juwan Taylor, king of the false start, king of the illegal formation. Juwan's weakness is those speed rushers who beat him to his outside shoulder. So now I've got Nolan dragging Juwan Taylor 8 yards back, and I've got Creed leaving with his eyes right away to go to the left side to go help with Caliendo. So now I've got Trey Smith against Jalen Carter with a wide two-way go. That's a big alley for that man to beat him and then get to Mahomes. I think you're going to lose that if you're the Chiefs over 4 quarters. And if you have to start helping towards Carter, then Milton's good enough, right, to beat Caliendo very consistently and start racking up pressures. So to me, if Milton and Nolan both do their jobs, Milton, when he gets his one-on-ones, he wins against Caliendo. Nolan, in terms of taking Juwan Taylor and putting that heat behind Mahomes, right, making sure he can't bail at the back of the pocket, he has to step up to the tackles.
That was the next thing I wanted to talk
about. If they do their jobs, then it's going to maximize Carter, and then if they have to index to Carter, it's going to maximize those guys. Those 3 are the big ones.
So the other thing that happened in the 22-2 Super Bowl, and this happens obviously in every Mahomes playoff game, is he was very impactful as a scrambler. Mm-hmm. So first thing I did was I looked up, like, okay, how has the Eagles defense been against mobile quarterbacks? Not great. But then I realized they played Jaden Daniels twice. And if you take out those games, they're actually fine. Yeah. So the statistics are very misleading because they had to play those 2 quarterbacks. However, that said, like, do you think there is something they can do differently, whether it's their rush plan or Zach Bond keeping eyes on Mahomes, to limit those always infuriating 3rd down scrambles for a 1st down?
Yeah, I think that you'll see Vic do a little bit of intentional mush rush. Like, that'll always show up on occasion if he's really killing you with the scrambles and you talk about it on the sideline. But in general, you think you can win well enough across the board with your pass rush that the verdict is pressure him fast pressure him again, get him down with the third guy, right? It's going to be
Yeah.
Nolan winning quick, so that way Josh Sweat can go through the left tackle Joe Tooney, so that way Jalen Carter can loops that way. It's going to be a family. It's going to be a four-man rush, an effort rush. Someone's going to get him down. Probably not the first guy who won because it's Mahomes, but somebody's going to get him down. You're going to lose on some third down scrambles, but that's a little bit inevitable. You need the sacks is the problem. If you become a mush rush team and you're saying we don't want to lose to the scrambles, then you lose the potential for the early pressure and the early sack. The ball's going to come out in 2.5 seconds. You're not going to get negative plays. To stop this Chiefs offense, you must get negatives. You have to knock them off script, right? Then you get to third and long. Mahomes is the best quarterback in history on third and long, but still, you cannot let them inch their way down the field. So you have to sell out for the sacks, which means you have to live with some of the scrambles. I think it's still a rush plan, get after him quick sort of idea.
Yeah, it's been an interesting season for Mahomes because typically I actually generally feel like, oh, that's Tommy DeVito's agent. I was like, who is that guy?
Oh, yes.
That suit. Mahomes typically is one of those guys, he is the guy where you do not want him to step up in the pocket. You have to, because that is often where he is the most deadly. And historically, a lot of his scrambles have come from stepping up through defense. But I actually think with the Tooney movement and some of the weakness in the interior offensive line, I want him to step up. That's different though, Ben. I
don't like how it feels, but that's what I want.
It's a little different because I actually think he has actually been impactful as a scrambler and not just as a scrambler, but keeping his eyes downfield and making plays when he escapes the pocket. He's kind of the opposite of Hurts in that way. We'll get to him. So I actually think what you just said is very important. It's really about setting an edge and not letting him escape.
Yeah, and if he gets upfield, all right, he's got a two-way go. He's staring down Zach Bond and Oren Burks in space. Mahomes is a devastating scrambler. He's got one of the highest success rate on third down scrambles the league has ever seen. He's always extending the play. He's always picking up just enough for the first down. It's very, very irritating. But in reality, from an athlete's perspective, if you have Mahomes and Zach Bond in space, you're going to live with that. You're really going to live. You have
Famous last words.
Relative to what? Xavier Worthy against Zach Bond in space. Marquise Brown against Oren Burks on a crosser, right? If early pressure is very important. You're going to lose some of those reps. It is inevitable. They're a very, very good team. But early pressure means you are denying and getting Mahomes away from the in-structure throw on the crosser, on the 4 strong to Marquise Brown where he turns upfield. And you're more scared of that ball carrier than you are of Mahomes. Because, again, for Mahomes, it's going to take 3 or 4. It's going to take kind of the incremental aspect of it, and then you can go in the next play, get another pressure, maybe get him down this time. So knowing that you're going to lose some of those reps, I think you still have to sell out for the sacks. I absolutely do.
Which of the Chiefs' skill players worry you the most in this game from a matchup perspective with this Eagles defense?
I think Worthy is just is the walking house call, and so it has to be, right? Just because if you end up being a heavy zone team, then Worthy's going to be able to get plays within structure. He's going to be able to get the ball in his hands with space. And then, you like Cooper DeJean, you like Reed Blankenship, you like Chauncey tackling in space, but it's the 4-2 guy, right? It is the fastest dude that we've got in the league right now. So I think Worthy, it's a little bit just kind of, the rest of the skill position players are what they are. I obviously, we talked about Kelsey coming into that Bills game, and it said, I'm not sure he can repeat the performance he had at the Texans, and he had 2 catches for 20 yards, 3 for 20 yards, or what it was. Kelsey is much more specific to the game plan this time around than he's been in the playoffs past, and I don't really think I think the Eagles are the best defense in the league against tight ends by yards per route run, by yards per target. Kelsey's, again, it's going to make 4 catches for 46 yards, and they're all going to be devastating. But Worthy's one who scares me the most.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's right, especially if, and I think we're in agreement about here, we do see a decent amount of man coverage from Vic Fangio. The other thing that I think is what you alluded to this, when the Eagles play their quarters, if Mahomes finally connects on some of those deep balls that he just hasn't been, because then suddenly I think Vic Fangio comes to this with an entire defensive plan thinking explosives are the least of our problems. And if they're able to finally connect, which obviously they haven't all season long, really, the Chiefs, on an explosive early on, then suddenly everybody gets a little bit nervous about the defensive plan. You know what I mean? Early on, because I think we all feel like we know who this Chiefs offense is, right? We know how they want to win. They want to win exactly the same way that they've won in the postseason thus far. It's worth mentioning here, Patrick Mahomes, unfortunately for the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is also true of Jalen Hurts, so we'll get to, is coming off of his best performance of the entire year. There's no reason for the Chiefs to depart from what we saw in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, and every Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes year, the Chiefs have a certain pass rate in the regular season. They get to the postseason and
then it just goes
exactly. Because they have such trust in 15, they can just do that, right? Other
Yeah.
teams cannot just do that, right? You saw the Bills, we have to get back to running the football, right? But the Chiefs can just be like, oh, we'll give the keys to this guy, and he's just not going to make mistakes for us.
You don't think that, we can kind of wrap here, that Andy is going to look at those light boxes? Because Vic Fangio, I think we agree also, is going to be like, run,
Yeah.
give. You don't think that the Chiefs say, okay, we're going to try. Obviously, there'll be a little bit, but.
Right. What I wouldn't be surprised to see is I do think that we talked a lot when the Chiefs came to the Super Bowl 2 years ago against the Eagles. It was 2 years ago. That was when they were first starting to do the whole 12-13 personnel thing, where they would all of a sudden just walk out in multiple tight end sets. They had actually a really diverse running game in that look. I wouldn't be surprised to see sudden, shocking appearances. Like they did the full house stuff against the Bills, right? Which is not 12-13 personnel, but it's the additional bodies in the backfield.
That was the Mahomes, for those who've forgotten, the Mahomes rushing touchdown in the last game.
Yeah. And so you're going to,
like,
all right, they're going to walk out in 11, and they're going to walk out in their spread formations. And Vic's like, cool, I built my defense for this. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chiefs get the jump on them, right, and come out for a series, no huddle, whatever it is, where all of a sudden, bang, like we've got 2 backs in the backfield, we have 2 tight ends here, we have Juju who can block for us as one of our receivers, and we get very condensed, and we say, all right, if you want to live in light boxes, we will put the players on the field necessary to punish this. Again, I think they're going to get 4.5 yards a pop, and that's not really fun.
With that
exactly. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chiefs have some of those change-ups in their bag, because it's the Bills thing is different from like a data perspective. You don't catch it the same way, full house versus 12 personnel, but it's the same theory, where all of a sudden we walk out with heavier bodies and you're not ready for this.
I assume the Eagles, I didn't look this up, but I assume that they match 12 personnel primarily with nickel. And they'll trust
they'll match 23 personnel with nickel. I don't give a hoot. They again, it goes back to what do you want the defensive line to do?
Yeah.
And if I get Jordan Davis on the field on 1st and 10, right? And then I get a good play, whatever, 2nd and 6, and then I can go hurry up, no huddle, and I can throw it now, right? And on 3rd and 6, whatever, I'll call a different play if I have incompletion. But if I get Jordan Davis on the field 1st and 10, go hurry up, and now 2nd and 10, I can spread out and take a shot. Like, I've just taken a pass rusher off that defensive front, because that's not Davis's game. It's a big deal for getting that extra half second Mahomes needs to actually connect with someone down the field.
Yeah, you got to have to. I think that's going to be the balance for Andy Reid, is like, can I use personnel to at least get the humans I want on the field, even if I'm not actually going to run the ball out of those looks.
Both offenses are going to use tempo to capture a defensive personnel and try to exploit.
I think we're going to learn. I think the first drive for Kansas City is going to be it's going to be like almost an information gathering drive.
I keep telling everybody, don't ask me anything about this game
until
let me watch the first quarter, and then I will tell you exactly what will happen in the next 3. I promise.
Let's take a quick break, come back, and talk about the other side of the ball. All right, so I said that Patrick Mahomes just played the best game of the season. I believe statistically that is correct in terms of like EPA per play. That's right. Jalen Hurts also just played his best game of the season. So if you're an Eagles fan and you were listening to that and you sound, well, I feel like actually you shouldn't be worried after our last conference. Not you should be worried. It's close is my point. I don't think either of us think that the Chiefs offense has an overwhelming matchup advantage there. Your quarterback is just played excellent game. Going back, we alluded to this, watching the last Super Bowl, had maybe the best game of his career. Big game Jalen is a real thing. Let's just start here with the quarterback before we get to the run game and how the Eagles might match it. How do you feel about this matchup just from a Jalen Hurts-centric perspective?
I think that Spags is a very tough defensive coordinator for Jalen.
Yeah.
Right? If you
Although he historically has been quite good against him.
So if you watch that Super Bowl, I think Spags did a lot of stuff to fluster Jalen, and they got some free rushers, and they got Jalen to hold on to the football, and then Jalen just heroed him, right? I mean, like, there's the Goddard throw up against the sideline, the other Goddard throw against the other sideline, the A.J. Brown touchdown, right? Like, Jalen just made the spectacular plays that as a defensive coordinator, when you play a really good quarterback, you go, all right, we had a good call in, and we had good coverage, we had a bracket on A.J., and it's a touchdown. What do you throw your hands up, you get to the next play? You watch the regular season game they played last year. Spags did a lot of the same stuff defensively, right? You're going to play a lot of two high zone. NGS had a really cool note where they said, Spags sends off-ball rushers at one of the highest rates of all defensive coordinators, right? Linebackers and safeties and corners coming from depth, guys who are not on the defensive line of scrimmage. Against the average quarterback, Spags sends guys from the left, right? More than he does the right. It's a quarterback's blind side. Against Jalen, remarkably more from the right-handed side, because Jalen doesn't like to move to his left. Jalen is not a good thrower when he's moving to his left. He's a stiff athlete. He's not loose enough to get the hips around, get the throw out. And so Spags understands, right, if I send pressure from this guy's right, he'll flush quickly. I can flush him to his left. It's going to minimize the number of throws he can take. I'm going to play too high zone. I'm going to make him see an underneath check down quickly. He likes to hold on to the football. He doesn't do that well. So I think Spags is a very tough matchup for Jalen. That Jalen we saw in 22 had a lot of confidence and had a lot of history of throwing the ball really, really well. This Jalen in 2024, not a lot of history of throwing the ball really, really well. Still a lot of confidence because he's Jalen, right? He's immune. He's just like, Michael Jordan aura top competitor. And so maybe we see him just immediately reignite what he had in that Super Bowl, right? Rise to that big game occasion. That's kind of the way he's coded. But I do think structurally, Spags does a lot of the stuff that Jalen struggled with as a passer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think Spags, Hurts' struggles with certain types of pressures, certain blitzes, because he's been very good against some blitzes this year, is the Chiefs' single biggest advantage in this game. It's really their defensive coordinator, right? And we'll talk about Chris Jones in a second. Because otherwise, like, Hurts thus far this year, we've seen, and this isn't totally new, but his numbers fall off a cliff when the four-man rush gets home. When you're able to flush him out of the pocket, especially if you get pressure up the middle, that's when things fall apart. So in some ways, you can say that, okay, well, the Chiefs don't really have a good four-man rush. I think statistically, it's probably one of the worst in the NFL. They get almost all of their pressure from blitzing. So you look at that on its face and you think, okay, well, that could actually work in the Eagles' advantage, the fact that, they don't have that, like, dominant rush to flip. But I do think that mental aspect of the pressures is where I start to worry. I worry about the simulated pressures. I worry about, I do worry about Chris Jones, frankly, because the Chiefs have been so good at getting him the matchups that they want by basically overloading the other side of the defensive line, and then Chris Jones gets one-on-ones. And I do worry about the Eagles, especially coming off of, one, they have injuries on the interior of the offensive line, and that's something that they've struggled with is interior pressure this postseason. Yeah,
the blitz bucket catches a lot of things, right? The blitz bucket catches, we played with a 5-down defensive line, so we're worried about Saquon Barkley and all 5 of the guys came. It captures, structurally we send the will against these formations. It's just like, we plug them in, we drop the defensive end. It's just the structure of our defense. It catches, cover 0, and we're going to man up and whatever. What Spags does particularly in terms of being able to play split field behind blitzes, right? They'll play with fire zones, 4 deep, 2 under. Yeah. So it's still 2 deep zone. Being able to send guys from depth, being able to drop guys off the line of scrimmage. And Spags is probably just the best blitzer in football, right? Brian Flores does it more, Aaron Glenn does it more, but if you talk to those guys, they'll revere what Spags does as a play caller. Spags has blitzes that are, I'm afraid of this quarterback and I want to get him down, Josh Allen, and he has blitzes that are, I just know if I heat you up a little bit, I can limit the number of things you do. And that's much more how he treats Jalen, right? He will not send, against Allen on 4th and 5, they sent a 2-week pressure, they got the slide the wrong way. He'll do that. Like, obviously, it's a key pass down or I get a free rusher. Against Jalen, it's a lot more, it's 1st and 10, it's like a, neutral situation. I'm just going to run blitz Leo Chanel, right? I'm going to have a front side blitz opposite the back. And, if you're passing the football and I've got 3 rushers on your right, one of them came from depth, he hit Mekhi Becton with velocity, he started to put Becton in your lap a little bit, I know where you're going to go. And my extremely well-coached and intelligent defense, my really good 2nd, 3rd level, they also know where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And so, Hurts has been better against the blitz this year. Spags is a different cat in terms of, all right, you might have been good against, when Jeff Hafley was blitzing you in week 1. Spags in the Super Bowl, 2 weeks of prep, it's a different monster entirely.
Hurts is also his splits versus man and zone blitzes are pretty stark. Obviously, much worse against, not obviously, but he's much worse against zone blitzes than man blitzes. And then, as you said, the Chiefs, 58 unblocked pressures this year, which is 3rd most in the NFL. This was
higher, Vikings and
it was weirdly the Bucks and
Bucks blitzed like crazy.
Blitzed like crazy.
Yeah, it's just total unblocked pressures. Yeah.
I can't remember who the other team was, but it might have been the Vikings. In any case, the reason why I'm starting here, and I think the reason why it's so important for the Kansas City, is otherwise I really like this matchup for the Eagles, right? Like if Hurts can get the ball out, and if they can deal with the simulated pressures, do worry me by the way, just because that's something we've seen him struggle with over the last few weeks. He's just if that first read's not there, if the throwing window is cloudy, he's made some poor decisions and taken sacks. But anyways, if the ball comes out, there are so many places where I think the Eagles can attack. We haven't even gotten to the run game and Saquon. We'll get to that in a second, but this Chiefs defense, the pass defense, has a lot of vulnerabilities. They have one superstar corner in Trent McDuffie, and Jalen Watson being back hurts is helpful, no doubt. But They are extremely vulnerable in the slot. Shamari Connor versus Devontae Smith is a matchup that absolutely favors the Philadelphia Eagles. It's Connor, former safety, not the fastest dude. Devontae Smith.
Chiefs giving up 1.96 yards per out run to players in the slot. It's the highest in football this year.
They're also giving up 8.7 yards per attempt to tight ends.
Yep, highest in football
Dallas
this year.
Goedert. So, like, I do really love the matchups. And even if this isn't a huge A.J. Brown game because they come out with whether it's putting McDuffie on him or doubling him or whatnot, there's so many options for Philadelphia to throw the ball.
I would even say when you find the bad McDuffie games, I'm going back to that first Cortland Sutton game with the Broncos. McDuffie, who was a nickel, was playing on the outside. What does he struggle with? Struggles with the big guys, right? A.J. Brown is the sort of body type that gives McDuffie problems, just because he's so out weight class that even when McDuffie's in phase and at the catch point, he's still going to get big boy, right? That's what happened on the big touchdown, right? Obviously, AJ, a little pump fake, whatever, catch the ball. But still, if you see McDuffie on AJ down the field with little safety help, listen, that's not 50-50. That's 60-40, even for a corner who's that good, right? And so if I were the Chiefs, I would want to be able to get McDuffie back into the slot in this game more than he's played in the slot this season. Yeah, we talked about this. McDuffie is, I want to say, about 80% outside corner this year, 85%, so one of the highest rates, if not the highest rate of his career. I want him to be in the slot a little bit more in this game. I'll put Jalen Watson, Josh Williams, Najee Johnson. I'll put those guys on A.J. Brown. I'll get a safety immediately over the top. I'll cloud him, right? Because Brown doesn't run a high variety of routes. And so I can play him little 2-on-1 and feel like I know where the ball's going to go. And then I can play McDuffie on Devontae Smith when he's in the slot. And then I can sacrifice anybody in the entire world to Jahan Dotson. If I lose the Super Bowl to Jahan Dotson, then I lose the Super Bowl to Jahan Dotson. It doesn't solve the Goddard problem. And that's where the Eagles' run and RPO game becomes really important because Goddard's best receiving days are the days where the Eagles are running the football well. They'll release him late on a long developing play action play, yards after the catch, or they'll just play him in the RPO game, right? Little split zone. Oh, split zone RPO, throw him into the flat, pick up a free 10 yards. So Goddard is the one where I have no solution for you. I got no structure. I got no player. It's Goddard's the big problem.
All right. Well, we've been taping now for about 40 minutes, and we have not talked about Saquon Barkley, which is sacrilegious. I'm sorry.
What is there to say? Very good. Can't stop him. Yawn.
Well, we talked about how the Eagles defense is perfectly content to let Kansas City run the ball.
Yep.
If you're the Chiefs defense, how do you feel is the best way to approach Saquon? Because we have seen teams do a litany of things, including stacking the box, which does leave you vulnerable to his explosives. He is such a unique back, and he's having such a unique season because he's so explosive, right? He's almost like A.J. Brown, like in terms of like the actual big play potential. So how do you think Steve Spagnuolo approaches that?
Yeah, so the Chiefs have actually been quite a good light box running team as well. It's funny because you find good run defense stats for the team facing the Eagles. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then you're like, does it feel like it matter at all in your heart? And you're like, oh, no, not really. But for those who care, the Chiefs in light boxes this year, right, only allowing 4.1 yards per carry, negative 112 rush yards under expectations, the lowest mark in the league when they're at a neutral box or better. I still think, great, you want to be light boxes against the Eagles? It probably is over, right? It doesn't matter regardless. So what I think is going to happen, when we talk about Spags' defense a lot, we talk about the movement of the safeties. We talk about the rotation, the defensive back end. Oh, the corner's flying to the deep half and the safety's coming down. And it's all cash in the pass. It's all cash in passing routes, distribution. Spags also really good at changing the picture in the front, in the box, right? In the Leo Chanel moment, right? We're all talking about him last year around this time against the Niners. They have a player in Leo Chanel who they can play at off-ball linebacker. They can walk him down to the edge as a Sam, but also just put him in the B gap. He just plays like defensive tackle, right? It's not dissimilar to some of the theory behind the 46 front, the Bears back in the day. What Spags can do with a guy like Leo Chanel, with a guy like Drew Tranquill is valuable to him in this regard, is he can put bodies in the box, line them up at different spots, and then change who is in which gap at or near the snap. And the Eagles are very reliant on Cam Jurgens gets his hand down on the ball, Jalen gets in position, they look at the front, and then they'll adjust the call, right? And they'll adjust who's blocking who and who's moving where relative to the fronts that they see. So I would expect Spags' solution is to put bodies on the field who he trusts to play at the first and the second level, and then he's going to put a lot of bodies in the interior gaps, move guys around near the edges, try to make Jalen keep balls that he shouldn't keep, give balls that he shouldn't give on the option stuff, and then change who's in which gap, run stun, and break your pass rush, and cause some chaos interior, hunt that TFL that you need to put the Eagles in a pure pass situation.
Yeah, the problem with those run stunts, though, is it does leave you vulnerable to zone read and QB run. Not that, obviously, and that's the big change. Jalen Hurts is not the runner that he was in, couple years ago, but he will still keep if you slant too hard inside.
Two off the naked side, two off the weak side, right? And that's where in your run blitz becomes a pass blitz world.
One thing I will say about the Chiefs' run defense is over the course of the season, pretty good. You talked about some of those stats with light boxes. They have not been good in the playoffs, and that's something that really kind of surprised me. Not against Buffalo, because Buffalo's
really
one
good.
of the 4 best rushing teams in the NFL. But even against Houston, man, like Houston ran the ball on them. Going back and watching all of the plus runs that the Chiefs defense has given up, a couple things stood out that I think I'd be curious to your thoughts on from a Philadelphia-centric perspective, because Philly runs everything. They're primarily an inside zone team, but they run everything.
They're an inside zone team because no one can stop it. It's the easiest thing to do, right?
Counter,
when they have to run something else, they're great at it.
They do everything. Okay, so in the playoffs, I'm telling you, this Chiefs defense has struggled to stop downhill runs. Both the Bills and the Texans hit them with duo for pretty big gains. And you can see both teams came in with a very clear plan. Where's Trent McDuffie? Okay, cool. We're going to run at the other corner.
Yep.
And this has been a problem for Kansas City, whether it was Najee Johnson or Jalen Watson coming off the injury. Pretty much every big play they've given up on the ground has been away from McDuffie, getting downhill.
Yep.
Is that something that you think the Eagles can take advantage of?
Yeah. So it's critical for this game, because when you hear Spags talk about his defense, we in the media, rotations, cover 2, zone 5, whatever. When Spags talks about his defense, the first and the second and the 19th word out of his mouth is tackling. Yeah. The only reason this defense works is because everybody.
This is such a great tackling Super Bowl, by the way. Both of these defenses tackle so well.
It's such a football nerd Super Bowl. It's so fun.
Run, hit, rally to the football, punch it out.
And so every player that the Chiefs acquire and put on the field, the first thing in their mind is how well does this guy tackle in space? It has to be the case for us. And in Najee Johnson, and to a lesser degree Jalen Watson, but still with Jalen Watson, but especially Najee, they have a weak link in the tackling system. And so you can go get to that guy, right? We say, all right, Justin Reed is a tackler, right? Trent McDuffie is a tackler. Drew Tranquil, Nick Bolton, these guys are tacklers. Chamari Connor a little bit, and then Najee Johnson, Jalen Watson are just guys who, all right, we want that to be our matchup in space. We want that to be our guy one-on-one. You brought up running away from Trent McDuffie. The other thing you see the Bills do a lot is they run away from Chris Jones. The Bills will walk out with the back to one side of the quarterback. They'll see where Chris Jones is, and then they'll flip the back. All right, we're running this sucker the other direction, right? We just run it away from Chris Jones. I'm not sure that's the best way to go about it. If I'm the Eagles, I want to run at Chris Jones. Let's lean on this son of a gun, right? Oh, you want to pass rush Chris Jones? It's double teams. It's double teams. It's double teams. We are putting you in the dirt for the entire first drive. See how much you like rushing the passer when you're real dog tired third quarter, fourth quarter after all this running play. Right. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see the Eagles run at Chris Jones, run more strong side stuff. But when they need to get into the boundary, absolutely. You circle 13. You want to run at that direction.
Well, the Chris Jones point is interesting because I think from a pass rush perspective, if you're Kansas City, you're like, great, Chris Jones against Mekhi Becton. Yes, please. But on the ground, Mekhi Becton run blocking, suddenly that turns from a matchup discrepancy to one where actually I think the Eagles can benefit.
If you take me to a world where the Eagles win this game, and they win it the way they've won all their games, right? With this slow, dominant anaconda performance where they're just so good on the ground, they don't give you any chances. I promise you, it's because in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, the Fox broadcast is showing clips of Chris Jones, who just does not have pass rush juice because they have beaten it out of him. It's a long, long season for a guy who's 30 years old. Run the ball at this guy and make him feel it for 4 quarters.
So I want to throw something else to you. And you and I talked about this a bit in the chat, and you alluded to this when we talked about where should McDuffie play. Because McDuffie's primarily played outside corner. This Chiefs defense plays most dime, or amongst the most of any in the NFL. That's not going to happen in this game. We throw that out the window. Ain't playing dime against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Got to make sure you have a DB against John Dotson. Got to get dime out there.
My question for you is, what is your comfort level if you're the Chiefs putting 3 linebackers on the field? Certainly if the Eagles come out in 12, which, but they're primarily an 11 team, 3 wide receivers. Because, and the reason I pose this to you is the Eagles have been very dominant against nickel defenses, obviously on the ground for the obvious reasons, which is they can push dudes around, but also through the air. I do think their 11 personnel against nickel, Jalen Hurts is like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I can read this. I know exactly what I want to do. When you look at the Eagles' numbers against base defenses, they fall off pretty significantly, both on the ground and through the air. Yep. Now, again, some of that has to do with the fact that they're in their 12 and 13 personnel, so it's not their base offense or whatever. But they go from, top 4 offense by just about every metric to bottom 5, 6. Teams don't do it a lot because it's scary. do you consider perhaps playing a little bit more base, meaning 3 linebackers on the field if you're Kansas City?
If you take me to the world where the Chiefs win this game and they win the way they typically win, then I expect, it's a high base game. That's how you get those bodies, like I said, against the running game that can make the picture confusing, right? When it's Chamari Connor who's the 7th guy in the box, I don't fear Chamari Connor standing up opposite Dallas Goedert, right, as that 6 technique, as that quasi-run defender. Okay, it's Chamari Connor. His number starts with a 2. Run him off the field. Put Leo Chanel out there. Leo's, like, the thing that Leo does so well is play as a quasi-defensive lineman. He's just an excellent run defender in the first level. You put even a Drew Tranquil there, it scares me a little bit more. Like I said, I think the Chiefs' first thing on offense is to check Oren Burks. How much do you want to tackle? Let's attack 42. The first thing on defense is, all right, the moment you give me 12, even if you're giving me 11 and it's clearly a run script, I'm going to put base on the field. Make Jalen throw you out of it. And Jalen can.
So, yeah, where's Trent McDuffie in this scenario in your mind? Are you worried about the slot if they're in 11 personnel?
So if I'm in base and I get pro set, right? So I get 1 receiver on each side, and then I've got Trent on one side, Jalen on the other. You can play shadow, right? Trent follows AJ, Jalen follows Devontae. You can flip it, or you can play left, right, and then that way you can play some zone coverage. You want to be in zone anyway. You can send both those guys in the rush. If I get slot, which is 2 receivers to the same side, then I can walk McDuffie into the slot. I know he can do it. He's done it for years. I can play Watson on the outside, and I can still play too high because I feel like I can defend the run out of base, and that allows me to get a safety over the top of Watson on AJ Brown. There's things you're going to lose to as a defensive coach. If you have Jalen Watson and AJ Brown, you're going to lose to a slant. You're going to. It's going to happen on a 3rd and 6. It's going to suck. You're not going to get off the field. But if you're losing AJ Brown slants, right? Okay, Jalen, do that 3 times down the field, right? I'm going to get you into some 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s. You got to beat me on multiple ones of them and go get to 4th down.
Which corners are on the field again in your mind?
McDuffie and Jalen Watson.
McDuffie and
Jalen I'm taking Chamari Connor off.
You're taking Connor off.
Yeah, because he's my nickel, right? He's my 5th defensive back.
But what you're explaining, the priority is you're leaving McDuffie on the field, but you're making sure that he is in the slot if
I get slot, if I get a slot, when I say if I get slot, it's an offensive formation. It's where the 2 receivers are the same side of the field. And then you have the 2 tight ends on the opposite side, and I can just play zone to that side, or I can walk Justin Reed down, right? And I feel like again, I don't have a solution to the Dallas Goedert problem, but there's only so many fires you can put out when you're facing an offense that's this talented as Philadelphia is. So yeah, I would want to play a lot of base. And then if I get Jahan Dotson, I'm probably just going to be a zone team, but I'm in base against 11, so I think I can stop the run, and then I get to be a zone team against Jalen Hurts in dropback situations. I feel like net positive for Chiefs if that's the matchup that I'm getting.
Eagles, 28th in success rate running against base defense. Again, you're always going to be worse, obviously, but I mentioned the ranking because...
We brought up the fact that they run everything, and they do. But because they have 3 receivers, none of whom are really high-impact blockers when they're in 11, they actually do have a weirdly small menu of 11 personnel runs. They obviously incorporate the quarterback, and they run bash stuff, right, where they invert the read. Instead of Barkley going outside and Jalen going up the field, they flip it, whatever. So they have their quarterback, run menu, but they really only have 6, 7 bodies that they can impact you with. Because if it's Devontae trying to dig out Justin Reed, it's not exactly what you like.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's funny because we talked about how... I think to go back to the beginning, I talked about if you slant the run, you do leave yourself vulnerable to Jalen Hurts keeping. I do think that's just what you take, right? Because with these matchups, it's all about what are you okay with as a defense? Eagles defense is okay with Kansas City running the ball at will because they're not good at it. I think if you're Kansas City, you're okay with Jalen Hurts keeping. That said, the Eagles do have a lot of matchup advantages.
Right. And the thing about a Jalen Hurts keep is that we often, intuitively, when we hear the quarterback keep, we're envisioning a quarterback in space alone. The Eagles do a lot of work to get Jalen behind Jordan Mailata, behind Mekhi Becton. So, we forced the Hurts keep. All right, it's a fullback on a screen, dude.
And
you got to win some blocks
now.
Pretty
quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not trying to get to the sideline.
That's a tight end H-back body with some lead blockers. You ain't solved the problem yet. There's a whole second issue to address.
All right, it's the moment of truth. Because we got to wrap up here. Let me ask you, has this conversation, are you feeling better or worse about the Eagles after?
There are a lot of paths for the Eagles to win this game. A lot, again, let me see the first quarter. Let me see that they're staring on a neutral script. The thing about the Eagles that makes them very hard for me to pick, I'm picking the Chiefs in this game, is that Jalen Hurts has attempted 13 passes while trailing in the second half since week 4, since the bye, right? They had a bye in week 5. Since then, 4 passes against the Panthers, 9 against the Commanders. We have not seen the Eagles have to dig their way even out of a neutral fourth quarter script, really, let alone a trailing fourth quarter script. Even the game they lost to the Commanders, remember, Kenny Pickett's in the game for the second half. And so the Eagles, wins are very script dependent versus the Chiefs, man. All right, the Eagles have them exactly where they want them. It's 24-14 at the start of the fourth quarter. Eagles are leading by 10. Yeah, are you going to feel good? Are you sure you're going to feel good as an Eagles fan with Mahomes with 2, potentially 3 drives left?
Part of me is reluctant to pick the Chiefs. We talked about all the matchup advantages because it's very easy for me to imagine a Saquon explosive early on, especially talking about some of the vulnerabilities we've seen with the Chiefs' run defense, even if they play them the way we've been discussing. However, I do feel like while the way that this Eagles defense also makes me nervous about picking Kansas City because I think they're awesome.
Yeah.
I just think in a game where, as we talked about, the Chiefs are perfectly content to put together long, excruciating drives, the difference between that offense and the Commanders at the beginning that we talked about and their ability to keep the Eagles offense off the field is why I'm going to go Kansas City, coupled with what I've seen from Hurts against exotic simulated pressures. And, oh, my God, here comes the boogeyman.
Yeah.
It's very close for me, though.
No, I think it's like a 55-45, 58-42 thing. And so, like, again, there's a lot of worlds where the Eagles win it. And because we expect very few drives, things will be about 10 drives to the Chiefs, 10 drives to the Eagles. One mistake is it, right? The Nico Remigio muffed kickoff is like potential game-deciding play. Remember, in the passing ball was a Kadarius Toney big return, right? Because there's going to be a limited number of drives in this game, and because both offenses are really good at taking the air out of the ball once they lead in the second half, this is very much a one-mistake game. So I say if you're going to pick the Chiefs, you give me the quick turnover, the quick Xavier-worthy fumble in the 14-0, brother, I will change colors immediately on my pick.
Your kicker also, I don't trust kicker, games like this. All right.
Don't really trust Butker too much either. I mean, it's going to come down to a couple of plays, man. It's going to be thin. It's going to be real thin.
We didn't even talk about the tush push and whether or not Kansas City. We got it. Yeah.
Get out of here.
All right, we're both taking the Chiefs. Thank you as always to our partners at Omaha Productions who are sitting all over there. We're looking at them right now. You guys can check this out on YouTube. Also, Ben and I are going to be after the Super Bowl immediately taping a pod that's going to hit yours Monday morning. All right, thanks so much.